The Toba Supereruption, when Earth nearly reset humanity. Around 74,000 years ago, humanity didn't face war, disease, or technology gone wrong. It faced the planet itself. In what is now Indonesia, Mount Toba didn't erupt. It detonated. This wasn't a typical volcanic event. It was one of the most powerful eruptions Earth has ever produced. The explosion blasted nearly 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and rock into the atmosphere. Entire regions were buried. The sky darkened across vast parts of Asia and Africa. Sunlight faded. Temperatures collapsed. What followed wasn't just a cold spell. It was a volcanic winter. Years without normal sunlight. Plant life failing. Food chains breaking. For early humans, survival stopped being about skill and became about endurance against extinction. Small populations were isolated in pockets where the climate was slightly less brutal. Food was scarce. Cold was constant. Some genetic evidence suggests the global human population may have dropped to just a few thousand individuals, not tribes, not civilizations, a number small enough that humanity's entire future depended on a fragile chain of survival. Those who lived adapted fast, changing diets, behaviors, and migration patterns. Anyone who didn't vanished. The Toba eruption wasn't loud in human memory, but it nearly erased us before history even began. And it wouldn't be the last time Earth itself came dangerously close to finishing the job. The Campanian Ignimbrite eruption, when fire fell across Europe. Around 39,000 years ago, long before Pompeii made Mount Vesuvius famous, the region unleashed something far worse. A massive eruption known as the Campanian Ignimbrite didn't just scar the land, it altered the course of human survival in Europe. This wasn't lava slowly creeping downhill. It was an explosion powerful enough to hurl ash and sulfur high into the atmosphere, dimming sunlight across vast parts of the planet. Temperatures dropped, ecosystems stalled. Another volcanic winter settled in. Ash didn't fall politely. It smothered entire regions, contaminating water, killing vegetation, and turning breathable air into a hazard. Thick gray layers buried landscapes thousands of kilometers away from the eruption itself. Then came the most lethal force of all, pyroclastic flows. Superheated clouds of gas, ash, and debris raced across the land at highway speeds. Forests vanished, rivers boiled. Anything in their path, animal or human, was erased instantly. For populations already living on the edge, this was catastrophic. Neanderthals, who were already struggling with climate shifts and competition, may have been hit especially hard. Some researchers believe this eruption accelerated their decline toward extinction. Early Homo sapiens barely endured. Survival meant migration, adaptation, and abandoning familiar territory. Those who failed to move or adjust simply disappeared from the record. This wasn't a bad year. It was a planetary stress test. Humanity survived again, not because it was dominant, but because it was flexible. And as the climate slowly recovered, humans themselves would trigger the next great crisis, one driven not by fire from the sky, but by their own success as hunters. Pleistocene Overhunting, when humans broke the food chain. By around 12,000 years ago, the greatest threat to life on Earth wasn't ice, fire, or darkness. It was us. As humans spread across continents, they didn't hunt cautiously. They hunted efficiently. Large animals were slow, visible, and packed with calories, so they became targets. Mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, massive grazing herds, the giants of the Pleistocene world. This wasn't one hunter with a spear. It was coordination, planning, group tactics. Humans learned to funnel animals, exhaust them, and kill them faster than nature could replace them. At the same time, the planet was warming. Ice sheets were retreating. Habitats were shifting. These animals had survived climate swings before, but they had never faced a predator that hunted strategically. The result was a cascading collapse. As megafauna vanished, plants they controlled overgrew or disappeared. Smaller animals lost protection. Entire ecosystems unraveled. And humans nearly paid the price. Without farming, refrigeration, or stored surplus, wiping out large prey meant wiping out the easiest food source. In some regions, people faced starvation not because nature failed, but because they had emptied it too quickly. Survival required another rapid adaptation. Humans shifted diets, hunted smaller animals, gathered more plants, and eventually invented agriculture. Those changes saved us. The mammoths weren't so lucky. This wasn't extinction by asteroid or volcano. It was extinction by success. And thousands of years later, when humans finally built complex civilizations, the next near ending wouldn't come from nature at all. but from the sun itself. The Carrington Event, when the sun almost shut civilization down. In 1859, the world wasn't digital, automated, or online, but it was already wired. Telegraph lines stretched across continents, carrying information faster than ever before. And then the sun reminded humanity who was really in control. What happened became known as the Carrington Event, the most powerful solar storm ever recorded. The sun released a massive burst of charged particles directly toward Earth, slamming into the planet's magnetic field. The sky ignited. Auroras appeared as far south as the Caribbean. Night looked like day. People thought the world was ending, but the real danger wasn't the light. It was the electricity. Telegraph systems sparked, shocked operators, and caught fire. Some machines continued sending messages after being unplugged, powered entirely by the storm's induced currents. Astronomer Richard Carrington had observed a bright solar flare just hours earlier, unknowingly witnessing the trigger. When the storm hit, it became clear that the sun could cripple human technology without touching the ground. In 1859, the damage was limited by simplicity. Today, the consequences would be catastrophic. A Carrington-level storm now could disable power grids, fry satellites, ground aircraft, collapse GPS systems, and erase digital communication. Food supply chains, hospitals, banking, and navigation would fail simultaneously. It wouldn't destroy humanity instantly, but it would push modern civilization to the edge, not with fire or war, but with silence. Humanity survived the sun once by accident. Next time, it would need preparation. And while space nearly ended us from above, the next near extinction came from something far more familiar. Ourselves, armed with ideology, industry, and total war. World War II, when industrialized violence nearly consumed humanity. By 1939, humanity had reached a dangerous milestone. Technology had advanced faster than wisdom, and global tensions were stretched thin. When Germany invaded Poland, the conflict that followed wasn't just another war. It was the first time human destruction became fully industrialized. World War II pulled entire continents into a single system of violence. Cities became targets. Civilians became casualties. Bombers erased neighborhoods overnight. Submarines turned oceans into graveyards. Famine, displacement, and fear spread faster than armies. Then came the horror that redefined cruelty. The Nazi regime transformed genocide into a machine. Extermination camps, forced labor, and systematic murder. 6 million Jews were killed, alongside millions of Romani people, disabled individuals, political opponents, and others deemed undesirable. Across Asia, Imperial Japan waged its own campaigns of brutality. Civilian massacres, forced labor, and biological warfare left scars that remain visible generations later. The war accelerated weapons beyond imagination. By 1945, humanity crossed a line it could never uncross. Atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 200,000 people and revealing a terrifying truth. Humanity now possessed the ability to erase itself in minutes. By the time the war ended, more than 70 million people were dead. Entire cities lay in ruins. Nations were broken. World War II didn't almost end humanity by accident. It nearly ended it because humans learned how to scale destruction faster than empathy. The war ended, but the weapons remained. And in the decades that followed, humanity would come closer than ever to pressing the final button, not through chaos, but through calculation. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 13 days from nuclear extinction. In 1962, humanity didn't face extinction through chaos or misunderstanding. It faced it through calm, calculated decision-making under pressure. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the world has ever come to total nuclear annihilation. At the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union weren't fighting directly. They were staring at each other, armed with thousands of nuclear weapons and a doctrine built on mutual destruction. One mistake meant everything. Then American reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. mainland. These weren't symbolic weapons. They could strike major American cities in minutes. President John F. Kennedy demanded removal. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev refused. For 13 days, the world lived on a knife's edge. U.S. naval forces established a blockade. Soviet ships approached. Submarines armed with nuclear torpedoes lurked beneath the ocean. Communication was slow, tense, and dangerously incomplete. Behind the scenes, catastrophe nearly happened. One Soviet submarine commander, believing war had already begun, prepared to launch a nuclear weapon. He was stopped only because one officer refused to authorize it. One decision prevented the end of civilization. Eventually, a deal was reached. The Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba. The United States quietly agreed to remove missiles from Turkey. The world stepped back from the brink. There were no explosions, no victory parades, just a shared realization humanity had survived by inches. Nuclear war wasn't avoided because systems worked perfectly. It was avoided because a few individuals hesitated at the right moment, and decades later, extinction would nearly arrive again. Not from politics or ideology, but from a silent object moving through space. The 1999 asteroid Near-Miss, when space almost ended everything. In 1999, extinction didn't arrive with fire, war, or warning sirens. It arrived quietly, as a moving dot on a radar screen. Astronomers tracking near-Earth space objects detected asteroid 1999 AN-10, a massive rock roughly 800 meters wide. That size isn't planet-killing, but it's civilization-ending. Had it struck Earth, the impact would have released energy equal to thousands of nuclear weapons detonating at once. Entire cities would vanish instantly. Firestorms would ignite across continents. Dust and debris would rise into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and collapsing global agriculture. Billions wouldn't die from the impact. They'd die from what came after. The asteroid missed Earth by about 600,000 kilometers, roughly twice the distance between Earth and the Moon. In cosmic terms, that's uncomfortably close. What made this moment especially dangerous wasn't just the size of the asteroid, it was the timing. Scientists detected it only months before its closest approach. There were no planetary defense systems, no response plans, no way to act if the trajectory had been slightly different. Humanity didn't dodge the asteroid through skill or preparation, it dodged it through luck. That near miss forced a reckoning. Space agencies around the world began improving asteroid detection, tracking near-Earth objects, and developing early warning systems. It was the first real step toward defending the planet from cosmic threats. Because asteroids don't announce themselves, they don't negotiate, and they don't care how advanced a species believes it is. And yet, even as humanity began watching the skies, it nearly ended itself again, not through rocks from space, but through a military exercise that looked a little too real. Able Archer 83, when a military exercise nearly triggered World War III. In November 1983, humanity came terrifyingly close to extinction, not because of war, but because of a misunderstanding. The event was called Able Archer 83, a NATO military exercise meant to simulate a nuclear response. To the Soviet Union, it looked like the real thing. This wasn't a casual drill. Able Archer used realistic communication protocols, nuclear launch procedures, coded messages, and movements that closely mirrored an actual first strike scenario. At the same time, global tensions were already extreme. Earlier that year, the Soviet Union had shot down a civilian airliner, killing 269 people, including Americans. Trust was non-existent. When the exercise began, Soviet intelligence didn't see practice, they saw preparation. Fearing a surprise nuclear attack, Soviet leadership quietly placed nuclear forces on high alert. Missile crews prepared launch sequences. Nuclear-capable aircraft were readied. Submarines repositioned. The world entered a state where one wrong interpretation could have ended everything. What made this moment especially dangerous was how close it came to automatic escalation. Soviet doctrine allowed for rapid retaliation if an attack seemed imminent. And for days, Western leaders had no idea how seriously the exercise was being misread on the other side. No alarms sounded, no missiles launched, but only because restraint, not systems, held. Eventually, the exercise ended. The tension dissolved. The world moved on without ever realizing how close it had come to catastrophe. Able Archer revealed something deeply unsettling. Humanity didn't almost end because of hatred or aggression. It almost ended because a simulation looked too convincing. Extinction doesn't always arrive with explosions. Sometimes it waits behind paperwork, protocols, and assumptions. And the most frightening part is this. History shows we don't need an asteroid, a volcano, or a plague to end ourselves. We've already come close enough, on our own. See you in the next video. In the mid-1300s, Europe was already struggling. War, famine, crowded cities, poor sanitation. But then something far worse arrived. Not an army, not a storm, a flea. Riding on the backs of black rats traveling along trade routes,